No sooner had Mirza Muhammad Baqir selected his companions than he ordered that the gate of the fort be flung open. Leaping upon their chargers and raising the cry of Ya Sahibu Saman, they plunged headlong into the camp of the enemy. The whole army fled in confusion before so terrific a charge. All but a few were able to escape. They reached Barfurush utterly demoralized and laden with shame. Abbas Quli Khan was so shaken with fear that he fell from his horse. Leaving in his distress one of his boots hanging from the stirrup, he ran away half-shod and bewildered in the direction which the army had taken. Filled with despair, he hastened to the prince and confessed the ignominious reverse he had sustained. Mirza Muhammad Baqir, on his part, emerging together with his 18 companions unscathed from that encounter, and holding in his hand the standard which an affrighted enemy had abandoned, repaired with exultation to the fort and submitted to his chief, who had inspired him with such courage as evidence of his victory. So complete a rout immediately brought relief to the hardened companions. It cemented their unity and reminded them afresh of the efficacy of that power with which their faith had endowed them. Their food, alas, was by this time reduced to the flesh of horses which they had brought away with them from the deserted camp of the enemy. With steadfast fortitude they endured the afflictions which beset them from every side. Their hearts were set on the wishes of Qudus. All else mattered but little. Neither the severity of their distress nor the continual threats of the enemy could cause them to deviate a hair-breadth from the path which their departed companions had so heroically trodden. A few were found who subsequently faltered in the darkest hour of adversity. The faint-heartedness which this negligible element was compelled to betray paled, however, into insignificance before the radiance which the mass of their stout-hearted companions shed in the hour of realized doom. Prince Mihdi Quli Mirza, who was stationed at Sari, welcomed with keen delight the news of the defeat that had overtaken the forces under the immediate command of his colleague, Abbas Quli Khan. Though himself desirous of extirpating the band that had sought shelter behind the walls of the fort, he rejoiced at the knowledge that his rival had failed to secure the victory which he coveted. He wrote immediately to Tehran and demanded that reinforcements in the form of bombshells and camel artillery, with all the necessary equipments, be dispatched without delay to the neighborhood of the fort, he being determined this time to effect the complete subjugation of its obstinate occupants. Whilst their enemies were preparing for yet another and still fiercer attack upon their stronghold, the companions of Qudus, utterly indifferent to the gnawing distress that afflicted them, acclaimed with joy and gratitude the approach of Nowruz. In the course of that festival, they gave free vent to their feelings of thanksgiving and praise in return for the manifold blessings which the Almighty had bestowed upon them. Though oppressed with hunger, they indulged in songs and merriment, utterly disdaining the danger with which they were beset. The fort resounded with the ascriptions of glory and praise which, both in the daytime and in the night season, ascended from the hearts of that joyous band. The verse, "Holy, holy, the Lord our God, the Lord of the angels and the Spirit," issued unceasingly from their lips, heightened their enthusiasm, and reanimated their courage. All that remained of the cattle they had brought with them to the fort was a cow which Haji Naziruddin-i Qazvini had set aside, and the milk of which he made into a pudding every day for the table of Qudus. Unwilling to deny his hunger-stricken friends their share of the delicacy which his devoted companion prepared for him, Qudus would, after partaking of a few teaspoonfuls of that dish, invariably distribute the rest among them. "I have ceased to enjoy," he was often heard to remark, "since the departure of Mullah Hussein, the meat and drink which they prepare for me. My heart bleeds at the sight of my famished companions, worn and wasted around me." Despite these adverse circumstances, he unfailingly continued further to elucidate in his commentary the significance of the Sad of Samad, and to exhort his friends to persevere till the very end in their heroic endeavors. At morn and at eventide, Mirza Muhammad Baqir would chant, in the presence of the assembled believers, verses from that commentary, the reading of which would quicken their enthusiasm and brighten their hopes. I have heard Mullah Mirza Muhammad-i Faruqi testify to the following: "God knows that we had ceased to hunger for food, Our thoughts were no longer concerned with matters pertaining to our daily bread. We were so enraptured by the entrancing melody of those verses that, were we to have continued for years in that state, no trace of weariness and fatigue could possibly have dimmed our enthusiasm or marred our gladness. And whenever the lack of nourishment would tend to sap our vitality and weaken our strength, Mirza Muhammad Bakir would hasten to Kudus and acquaint him with our plight. A glimpse of his face, the magic of his words as he walked amongst us, would transmute our despondency into golden joy. We were reinforced with a strength of such intensity that, had the host of our enemies appeared suddenly before us, we felt ourselves capable of subjugating their forces. On the day of Nowruz, which fell on the 24th of Rabi Thani, in the year AH 1265, AD 1849, Qudus alluded, in a written message to his companions, to the approach of such trials as would bring in their wake the martyrdom of a considerable number of his friends. A few days later, an innumerable host, commanded by Prince Mihdi Quli Mirza and seconded by the joint forces of Suleiman Khan-i Afshar, of Abbas Quli Khan-i Larijani, and of Jafar Quli Khan, assisted by about 40 other officers, encamped in the neighborhood of the fort and set about constructing a series of trenches and barricades in its immediate vicinity. On the 9th day of the month of Bahar, a footnote says the 9th day after Nowruz, the commanding officer gave orders to those in charge of his artillery to open fire in the direction of the besieged. While the bombardment was in progress, Qudus emerged from his room and walked to the center of the fort. His face was wreathed in smiles, and his demeanor breathed forth the utmost tranquillity. As he was pacing the floor, a cannonball suddenly fell before him. "How utterly unaware," he calmly remarked as he rolled it with his foot, "are those boastful aggressors of the power of God's avenging wrath? Have they forgotten that a creature as insignificant as a gnat was capable of extinguishing the life of the all-powerful Nimrod? Have they not heard that the roaring of the tempest was sufficient to destroy the people of Ad and Thamud, and to annihilate their forces? Seek they to intimidate the heroes of God, in whose sight the pomp of royalty is but an empty shadow, with such contemptible evidences of their cruelty? You are," he added as he turned to his friends, "those same companions of whom Muhammad, the apostle of God, has thus spoken. Oh, how I long to behold the countenance of my brethren who will appear in the end of the world. Blessed are we, blessed are they, greater is their blessedness than ours. Beware lest you allow the encroachments of self and desire to impair so glorious a station. Fear not the threats of the wicked, neither be dismayed by the clamor of the ungodly. Each one of you has his appointed hour, and when that time is come, neither the assaults of your enemy nor the endeavors of your friends will be able either to retard or to advance that hour. If the powers of the earth league themselves against you, they will be powerless, ere that hour strikes, to lessen by one jot or tittle the span of your life. Should you allow your hearts to be agitated for but one moment by the boomings of these guns, which, with increasing violence, will continue to shower their shot upon this fort, you will have cast yourselves out of the stronghold of divine protection." So powerful an appeal could not fail to breathe confidence into the hearts of those who heard it. A few, however, whose countenances betrayed vacillation and fear, were seen huddled together in a sheltered corner of the fort, viewing with envy and surprise the zeal that animated their companions. The army of Prince Mihdi Quli Mirza continued for a few days to fire in the direction of the fort. His men were surprised to find that the booming of their guns had failed to silence the voice of prayer and the acclamations of joy which the besieged raised in answer to their threats. Instead of the unconditional surrender which they expected, the call of the muezzin, the chanting of the verses of the Koran, and the chorus of gladsome voices intoning hymns and thanksgiving and praise reached their ears without ceasing. Exasperated by these evidences of unquenchable fervor, and impelled by a burning desire to extinguish the enthusiasm which swelled within the breasts of his opponents, Jafar Quli Khan erected a tower, upon which he stationed his cannon, and from that eminence directed his fire into the heart of the fort. A footnote here says, Thus the latter constructed 4 towers on the 4 sides of the castle, and raised them so high that they were able to command the interior of the fortress with their guns, and to make the garrison targets for their bullets. Then the faithful, seeing this, began to dig subterranean passages, and to retreat thither. But the ground of Mazindaran lies near the water, so that these poor sufferers dwelt amidst mud and water till their garments rotted away with damp. From the Tarikh-i-Jadid, page 81. Qurus immediately summoned Mirza Muhammad Baqir, and instructed him to sally again and inflict upon the boastful newcomer a humiliation no less crushing than the one which Abbas Quli Khan had suffered. Let him know, he added, that God's lion-hearted warriors, when pressed and driven by hunger, are able to manifest deeds of such heroism as no ordinary mortals can show. Let him know that the greater their hunger, the more devastating shall be the effects of their exasperation. Mirza Muhammad Baqir again ordered 18 of his companions to hurry to their steeds and follow him. The gates of the fort were thrown open, and the cry of Ya Sahibuz Saman, fiercer and more thrilling than ever, diffused panic and consternation in the ranks of the enemy. Jafar Quli Khan, with 30 of his men, fell before the sword of their adversary, who rushed to the tower, captured the guns, and hurled them to the ground. Thence they threw themselves upon the barricades which had been erected, demolished a number of them, and would, but for the approaching darkness, have captured and destroyed the rest. Triumphant and unhurt, they repaired to the fort, carrying back with them a number of the stoutest and best-fed stallions which had been left behind. A few days elapsed, during which there was no sign of a counter-attack. A sudden explosion in one of the ammunition stores of the enemy, which had caused the death of several artillery officers and a number of their fellow combatants, forced them for 1 whole month to suspend their attacks upon the garrison. A footnote here says, the siege had been going on for 4 months, and had made no visible progress. The old fortifications had been destroyed, but with indomitable energy the Babis had built new ones, and night and day they restored and enlarged them. It was impossible to foresee the outcome of this situation, the more so because, as I have already said, Mazindaran was not the only region in Persia where the devotees of the new faith were giving evidence of their zeal and their daring. The king and the prime minister, in their anxiety, burst forth into abuse against their lieutenants. Not only did they charge them with incompetence in the most bitter terms, but they threatened to extend to them the same treatment planned for the Babis, if a final settlement were not reached without delay. Thereupon the command was taken from Mirdi Quli Mirza and given to Suleiman Khani Afshar, a man of acknowledged firmness and of great influence, not only in his own tribe, one of the noblest in Persia, but throughout the military circles who knew him and held him in high esteem. He was given the most rigorous orders. From Comte de Gobineau's Les religions et les philosophies dans l'Asie centrale, pages 183 to 184. This lull enabled a number of the companions to emerge occasionally from their stronghold and gather such grass as they could find in the field as the only means wherewith to allay their hunger. The flesh of horses, even the leather of their saddles, had been consumed by these hard-pressed companions. They boiled the grass and devoured it with piteous avidity. Another footnote says, Abdul-Baha refers, in the Memorials of the Faithful, pages 16 to 17, to the hardships and sufferings endured by the heroic defenders of the fort of Sheikh Tabasi. He pays a glowing tribute to the constancy, the zeal and courage of the besieged, mentioning in particular Mullah Sadiq-i-Muqaddas. For 18 days, he says, they remained without food. They lived on the leather of their shoes. This too was soon consumed, and they had nothing left but water. They drank a mouthful every morning and lay famished and exhausted in their fort. When attacked, however, they would instantly spring to their feet and manifest in the face of the enemy a magnificent courage and astonishing resistance. Under such circumstances, to maintain an unwavering faith and patience is extremely difficult, and to endure such dire afflictions a rare phenomenon. Those who remained firm had already consumed not only all their food supply, but such grass as they could find in the enclosure and the bark of all the trees. There remained only the leather of their belts and the scabbards of their swords. They had to resort to the expedient recommended by the Spanish ambassador to the soldiers of the League besieged in Paris, They ground the bones of the dead and made flour with the dust thereof. At last, desperate, they were reduced to perpetrate a sort of profanation. The horse of Mullah Hussein had died of the wounds suffered during that fatal night which witnessed the death of its master. The Babis had buried it out of regard for their holy leader, and a little of the deep veneration which all felt for him hovered over the grave of the poor animal. They held council, and deploring the necessity for such a discussion, they debated the question whether extreme distress could justify them to disinter the sacred charger and eat the remains. With deep sorrow they agreed that the deed was justifiable. They cooked the remains of the horse with the flour made from the bones of the dead. They ate this strange mixture and took up their guns once more. From Comte Gobineau's Les religions et les philosophies dans l'Asie centrale, pages 186 to 187. As their strength declined, as they languished exhausted within the walls of their fort, Qudus multiplied his visits to them and endeavoured by his words of cheer and of hope to lighten the load of their agony. The month of Jamadi Youth Thani, the 24th of April to the 23rd of May, AD 1849, had just begun when the artillery of the enemy was heard again discharging its showers of balls upon the fort. Simultaneously with the booming of the cannons, a detachment of the army, headed by a number of officers and consisting of several regiments of infantry and cavalry, rushed to storm it. The sound of their approach impelled Qudus to summon promptly his valiant lieutenant, Mirza Muhammad Baqir, and to bid him emerge with 36 of his companions and repulse their attack. Never since our occupation of this fort, he added, have we, under any circumstances, attempted to direct any offensive against our opponents. Not until they unchained their attack upon us did we arise to defend our lives. Had we cherished the ambition of waging holy war against them, had we harbored the least intention of achieving ascendancy through the power of our arms over the unbelievers, we should not until this day have remained besieged within these walls. The forces of our arms would have by now, as was the case with the companions of Muhammad in days past, convulsed the nations of the earth and prepared them for the acceptance of our message. Such is not the way, however, which we have chosen to tread. Ever since we repaired to this fort, our sole, our unalterable purpose has been the vindication by our deeds, and by our readiness to shed our blood in the path of our faith, of the exalted character of our mission. The hour is fast approaching, and we shall be able to consummate this task. Mirza Muhammad Baqir once more leaped on horseback and, with the 36 companions whom he had selected, confronted and scattered the forces which had beset him. He carried with him, as he re-entered the gate, the banner which an alarmed enemy had abandoned as soon as the reverberating cry of Ya Sahibus Saman had been raised. 5 of his companions suffered martyrdom in the course of that engagement, all of whom he bore to the fort and interred in one tomb close to the resting place of their fallen brethren. Prince Mehdi Quli Mirza, astounded by this further evidence of the inexhaustible vitality of his opponents, took counsel with the chiefs of his staff, urging them to devise such means as would enable him to bring that costly enterprise to a speedy end. For 3 days he deliberated with them, and finally came to the conclusion that the most advisable course to take would be to suspend all manner of hostilities for a few days, in the hope that the besieged, exhausted with hunger and goaded by despair, would decide to emerge from their retreat and submit to an unconditional surrender. As the prince was waiting for the consummation of the plan he had conceived, there arrived from Tehran a messenger bearing to him the farman of his sovereign. This man was a resident of the village of Kand, a place not far from the capital. He succeeded in obtaining leave from the prince to enter the fort and attempt to induce 2 of its occupants, Mullah Mehdi and his brother Mullah Baqir-i Kandi, to escape from the imminent danger to which their lives were exposed. As he approached its walls, he called the sentinels and asked them to inform Mullah Mehdi-i Kandi that an acquaintance of his desired to see him. Mullah Mehdi reported the matter to Qudus, who permitted him to meet his friend. I have heard Ake-i Kalim give the following account, as related to him by that same messenger whom he met in Tehran. I saw, the messenger informed me, Mullah Mehdi appear above the wall of the fort, his countenance revealing an expression of stern resolve that baffled description. He looked as fierce as a lion. His sword was girded on over a long white shirt, after the manner of the Arabs, and he had a white kerchief around his head. "What is it that you seek?" he impatiently inquired. "Say it quickly, for I fear that my master will summon me and find me absent." The determination that glowed in his eyes confused me. I was dumbfounded at his looks and manner. The thought suddenly flashed through my mind that I would awaken a dormant sentiment in his heart. I reminded him of his infant child, Rahman, whom he had left behind in the village in his eagerness to enlist under the standard of Mullah Hussein. In his great affection for the child, he had specially composed a poem which he chanted as he rocked his cradle and lulled him to sleep. "Your beloved Rahman," I said, "longs for the affection which you once lavished upon him. He is alone and forsaken and yearns to see you." "Tell him from me," was the father's instant reply, "that the love of the true Rahman, a love that transcends all earthly affections, has so filled my heart that it has left no place for any other love besides his." A footnote here says of the word Rahman, reference to God, the word Rahman meaning merciful. The poignancy with which he uttered these words brought tears to my eyes. "Accursed," I indignantly exclaimed, "be those who consider you and your fellow disciples as having strayed from the path of God." "What," I asked him, "if I venture to enter the fort and join you?" "If your motive be to seek and find the truth," he calmly replied, "I will gladly show you the way. And if you seek to visit me as an old and lifelong friend, I will accord you the welcome of which the prophet of God has spoken, 'Welcome your guests, though they be of the infidels.' I will, faithful to that injunction, offer you the boiled grass and the churned bones which serve as my meat, the best I can procure for you. But if your intention be to harm me, I warn you that I will defend myself and will hurl you from the heights of these walls to the ground." His unswerving obstinacy convinced me of the futility of my efforts. I could feel that he was fired with such enthusiasm that, were the divines of the realm to assemble and endeavor to dissuade him from the course he had chosen to pursue, he would, alone and unaided, baffle their efforts. Neither, was I convinced, could all the potentates of the earth succeed in luring him away from the beloved of his heart's desire. "May the cup," I was moved to say, "which your lips have tasted bring you all the blessings you seek. The prince," I added, "has vowed that whoever steps out of this fort will be secure from danger, that he will even receive a safe passage from him, as well as whatever expenses he may require for the journey to his home." He promised to convey the prince's message to his fellow companions. "Is there anything further you wish to tell me?" he added. "I am impatient to join my master." "May God," I replied, "assist you in accomplishing your purpose." "He has indeed assisted me," he burst forth in exultation. "How else could I have been delivered from the darkness of my prison home in Kand? How could I have reached this exalted stronghold?" No sooner had he uttered these words than, turning his face away from me, he vanished from my sight. As soon as he had joined his companions, Mullah Mehdi conveyed the prince's message to them. On the afternoon of that same day, Syed Mirza Hussein-i Mutawalli, accompanied by his servant, left the fort and went directly to join the prince in his camp. The next day, Rasul-i Banamiri and a few others of his companions, unable to resist the ravages of famine and encouraged by the explicit assurances of the prince, sadly and reluctantly separated themselves from their friends. No sooner had they stepped out of the fort than they were all instantly slain at the order of Abbas Quli Khan-i Larijani. During the days that elapsed after that incident, the enemy, still encamped in the neighborhood of the fort, refrained from any act of hostility towards Qudus and his companions. On Wednesday morning, the 16th of Jamadiyuth Thani, the 9th of May, A.D. 1849, an emissary of the prince arrived at the fort and requested that 2 representatives be delegated by the besieged to conduct confidential negotiations with them, in the hope of arriving at a peaceful settlement of the issues outstanding between them. Accordingly, Qudus instructed Mullah Yusuf-i Ardibili and Syed Rizai-i Khurasani to act as his representatives and bade them inform the prince of his readiness to accede to his wish. Mehdi Kuli Mirza courteously received them, and invited them to partake of the tea which he had prepared. We should, they said, as they declined his offer, feel it to be an act of disloyalty on our part, were we to partake of either meat or drink whilst our beloved leader languishes worn and famished in the fort. The hostilities between us, the prince remarked, have been unduly prolonged. We, on both sides, have fought long and suffered grievously. It is my fervent wish to achieve an amicable settlement of our differences. He took hold of a copy of the Koran that lay beside him, and wrote, with his own hand, in confirmation of his statement, the following words on the margin of the opening surah. I swear by this most holy book, by the righteousness of God who has revealed it, and the mission of him who was inspired with its verses, that I cherish no other purpose than to promote peace and friendliness between us. Come forth from your stronghold, and rest assured that no hand will be stretched forth against you. You yourself and your companions, I solemnly declare, are under the sheltering protection of the Almighty, of Muhammad, his prophet, and of Nasiruddin Shah, our sovereign. I pledge my honor that no man, either in this army or in this neighborhood, will ever attempt to assail you. The malediction of God, the omnipotent avenger, rest upon me if in my heart I cherish any other desire than that which I have stated. He affixed his seal to this statement, and delivering the Koran into the hands of Mullah Yusuf, asked him to convey his greetings to his leader, and to present him this formal and written assurance. I will, he added, in pursuance of my declaration, dispatch to the gate of the fort this very afternoon a number of horses which I trust he and his leading companions will accept and mount, in order to ride to the neighborhood of this camp, where a special tent will have been pitched for their reception. I would request them to be our guests until such time as I shall be able to arrange for their return, at my expense, to their homes. Qudus received the Koran from the hand of his messenger, kissed it reverently, and said, O our Lord, decide between us and between our people with truth, for the best to decide art thou. Quotation from the Koran 788. Immediately after, he bade the rest of his companions prepare themselves to leave the fort. By our response to their invitation, he told them, we shall enable them to demonstrate the sincerity of their intentions. As the hour of their departure approached, Qudus attired his head with the green turban which the Bab had sent to him at the time he sent the one that Mullah Hussein wore on the day of his martyrdom. At the gate of the fort, they mounted the horses which had been placed at their disposal, Qudus mounting the favourite steed of the prince which the latter had sent for his use. His chief companions, among whom were a number of Sayyids and learned divines, rode behind him and were followed by the rest, who marched on foot, carrying with them all that was left of their arms and belongings. As the company, who were 202 in number, reached the tent which the prince had ordered to be pitched for Qudus in the vicinity of the public bath of the village of Dizva, overlooking the camp of the enemy, they alighted and proceeded to occupy their lodgings in the neighborhood of that tent. Soon after their arrival, Qudus emerged from his tent and, gathering together his companions, addressed them in these words: You should show forth exemplary renunciation, for such behavior on your part will exalt our cause and redound to its glory. Anything short of complete detachment will but serve to tarnish the purity of its name and to obscure its splendor. Pray the Almighty to grant that even to your last hour he may graciously assist you to contribute your share to the exaltation of his faith. A few hours after sunset, they were served with dinner brought from the camp of the prince. The food that was offered them in separate trays, each of which was assigned to a group of 30 companions, was poor and scanty. 9 of us, those who were with Qudus subsequently related, were summoned by our leader to partake of the dinner which had been served in his tent. As he refused to taste it, we too, following his example, refrained from eating. The attendants who waited upon us were delighted to partake of the dishes which we had refused to touch, and devoured their contents with appreciation and avidity. A few of the companions who were dining outside the tent were heard remonstrating with the attendants, pleading that they were willing to buy from them at however exorbitant a price the bread which they needed, Qudus strongly disapproved of their conduct and rebuked them for the request they had made. But for the intercession of Mirza Muhammad Baqir, he would have severely punished them for having so completely disregarded his earnest exhortations. At daybreak a messenger arrived, summoning Mirza Muhammad Baqir to the presence of the prince. With the consent of Qudus, he responded to that invitation and returned an hour later, informing his chief that the prince had, in the presence of Suleiman Khan-i-Afshar, reiterated the assurances he had given, and had treated him with great consideration and kindness. "My oath," he assured me, Mirza Muhammad Baqir explained, "is irrevocable and sacred." He cited the case of Jafar Quli Khan, who, notwithstanding his shameless massacre of thousands of soldiers of the imperial army in the course of the insurrection fomented by the Salah, was pardoned by his sovereign and promptly invested with fresh honours by Muhammad Shah. "Tomorrow the prince intends me to accompany you in the morning to the public bath, from whence he will proceed to your tent, after which he will provide the horses required to convey the entire company to Sangsar, from where they will disperse, some returning to their homes in Iraq, and others proceeding to Khorasan. At the request of Suleiman Khan, who urged that the presence of such a large gathering at such a fortified centre as Sangsar would be fraught with risk, the prince decided that the parties should disperse instead at Firuzkool. I am of the opinion that what his tongue professes his heart does not believe at all." Qudus, who shared his view, bade his companions disperse that very night, and stated that he himself would soon proceed to Bafurush. They hastened to implore him not to separate himself from them, and begged to be allowed to continue to enjoy the blessings of his companionship. He counselled them to be calm and patient, and assured them that whatever afflictions the future might yet reveal, they would meet again. "Weep not," were his parting words. "The reunion which will follow this separation will be such as shall eternally endure. We have committed our cause to the care of God. Whatever be his will and pleasure, the same we joyously accept." The prince failed to redeem his promise. Instead of joining Qudus in his tent, he called him with several of his companions to his headquarters, and informed him, as soon as they reached the tent of the Farash Bashi, that he himself would summon him at noon to his presence. Shortly after, a number of the prince's attendants went and told the rest of the companions that Qudus permitted them to join him at the army's headquarters. Several of them were deceived by this report, were made captives, and were eventually sold as slaves. These unfortunate victims constitute the remnants of the companions of the fort of Sheikh Tabasi, who survived that heroic struggle and were spared to transmit to their countrymen the woeful tale of their sufferings and trials. Soon after, the prince's attendants brought pressure to bear upon Mullah Yusuf to inform the remainder of his companions of the desire of Qudus that they immediately disarm. "What is it that you will tell them exactly?" they asked him, as he was being conducted to a place at some distance from the army's headquarters. "I will," was the bold reply, "warn them that whatever be henceforth the nature of the message you choose to deliver to them on behalf of their leader, that message is naught but downright falsehood." These words had hardly escaped his lips when he was mercilessly put to death. From this savage act they turned their attention to the fort, plundered it of its contents, and proceeded to bombard and demolish it completely. They then immediately encompassed the remaining companions and opened fire upon them. Any who escaped the bullets were killed by the swords of the officers and the spears of their men. In the very throes of death, these unconquerable heroes were still heard to utter the words, "Holy, holy, O Lord our God, Lord of the angels and the Spirit," words which in moments of exultation had fallen from their lips, and which they now repeated with undiminished fervour at this crowning hour of their lives. As soon as these atrocities had been perpetrated, the prince ordered those who had been retained as captives to be ushered one after another into his presence. Those among them who were men of recognized standing, such as the father of Badi, Mullah Mirza Muhammad-i Furugi, and Haji Nazir-i Qazvini, he charged his attendants to conduct to Tehran, and obtain in return for their deliverance a ransom from each one of them in direct proportion to their capacity and wealth. As to the rest, he gave orders to his executioners that they be immediately put to death, A few were cut to pieces with the sword, others were torn asunder, a number were bound to trees and riddled with bullets, and still others were blown from the mouths of cannons and consigned to the flames. This terrible butchery had hardly been concluded when 3 of the companions of Qudus, who were residents of Sangsar, were ushered into the presence of the prince. One of them was Syed Ahmad, whose father, Mir Muhammad Ali, a devoted admirer of Sheikh Ahmad-i-Asai, had been a man of great learning and distinguished merit. He, accompanied by the same Syed Ahmad and his brother Mir Abul Qasim, who met his death the very night on which Mullah Hussein was slain, had departed for Kabila in the year preceding the declaration of the Bab, with the intention of introducing his 2 sons to Syed Qasim. Ere his arrival, the Syed had departed this life. He immediately determined to leave for Najaf. While in that city, the Prophet Muhammad one night appeared to him in a dream, bidding the Imam Ali, the commander of the faithful, announce to him that after his death both his sons, Syed Ahmad and Mir Abul Qasim, would attain the presence of the promised Qaim, and would each suffer martyrdom in his path. As soon as he awoke, he called for his son, Syed Ahmad, and acquainted him with his will and last wishes. On the 7th day after that dream, he died. In Sangsar, 2 other persons, Kabilai Ali and Kabilai Abu Muhammad, both known for their piety and spiritual insight, strove to prepare the people for the acceptance of the promised revelation, the advent of which they felt was fast approaching. In the year 1264 AH, AD 1847-8, they publicly announced that in that very year a man named Syed Ali would, preceded by a black standard and accompanied by a number of his chosen companions, set forth from Khorasan and proceed to Mazindaran. They urged every loyal adherent of Islam to arise and lend him every possible assistance. The standard which he will hoist, they declared, will be none other than the standard of the promised Qaim. He who will unfurl it, none other than his lieutenant and chief promoter of his cause. Whoso follows him will be saved, and he who turns away will be among the fallen. Kabilai Abu Muhammad urged his 2 sons, Abul Qasim and Muhammad Ali, to arise for the triumph of the new revelation, and to sacrifice every material consideration for the attainment of that end. Both Kabilai Abu Muhammad and Kabilai Ali died in the spring of that same year. These 2 sons of Kabilai Abu Muhammad were the 2 companions who had been ushered together with Syed Ahmad into the presence of the prince. Mullah Zainul Abidin Isha Mirzadi, one of the trusted and learned counsellors of the government, acquainted the prince with their story and related the experiences and activities of their respective fathers. For what reason, Syed Ahmad was asked, have you chosen to tread a path that has involved you and your kinsman in such circumstances of wretchedness and disgrace? Could you not have been satisfied with the vast number of erudite and illustrious divines who are to be found in this land and in Iraq? My faith in this cause, he fearlessly retorted, is born not of idle imitation. I have dispassionately inquired into its precepts, and am convinced of its truth. When in Najaf, I ventured to request the preeminent mujtahid of that city, Sheikh Muhammad Hassan-i-Najafi, to expound for me certain truths connected with the secondary principles underlying the teachings of Islam. He refused to accede to my request. I reiterated my appeal, whereupon he angrily rebuked me and persisted in his refusal. How can I, in the light of such experience, be expected to seek enlightenment on the abstruse articles of the faith of Islam from a divine, however illustrious, who refuses to answer my question on such simple and ordinary matters, and who expresses his indignation at my having put such questions to him? What is your belief concerning Haji Muhammad Ali? Asked the prince. We believe, he replied, Mullah Hussein to have been the bearer of the standard of which Muhammad has spoken. Should your eyes behold the black standards proceeding from Khorasan, hasten ye towards them, even though ye should have to crawl over the snow. For this reason we have renounced the world, and have flocked to his standard, a standard which is but a symbol of our faith. If you wish to bestow upon me a favour, bid your executioner put an end to me, and enable me to be gathered to the company of my immortal companions. for the world and all its charms have ceased to allure me. I long to depart this life and return to my God." The prince, who was reluctant to take the life of a Sayyid, refused to order his execution. His two companions, however, were immediately put to death. He, with his brother Sayyid Abu Talib, was delivered into the hands of Mullah Zainul Abidin, who was instructed to conduct them to Sarsang. Meanwhile, Mirza Muhammad Taqi, accompanied by 7 of the ulamas of Sari, set out from that town to share in the meritorious act of inflicting the punishment of death upon the companions of Qudus. When they found that they had already been put to death, Mirza Muhammad Taqi urged the prince to reconsider his decision and to order the immediate execution of Sayyid Ahmad, pleading that his arrival at Sari would be the signal for fresh disturbances as grave as those which had already afflicted them. The prince eventually yielded on the express condition that he be regarded as his guest until his own arrival at Sari, at which time he would take whatever measures were required to prevent him from disturbing the peace of the neighborhood. No sooner had Mirza Muhammad Taqi taken the direction of Sari than he proceeded to vilify Sayyid Ahmad and his father. "Why ill-treat a guest," his captive pleaded, "whom the prince has committed to your charge? Why ignore the Prophet's injunction, 'Honor thy guest, though he be an infidel'?" Roused to a burst of fury, Mirza Muhammad Taqi, together with his 7 companions, drew their swords and cut his body to pieces. With his last breath, Sayyid Ahmad was heard invoking the aid of the Sahibus Saman. As to his brother, Sayyid Abu Talib, he was safely conducted to Sarsang by Mullah Zainul Abidin, and to this day resides with his brother Sayyid Muhammad Riza in Mazindaran. Both are engaged in the service of the cause and are accounted among its active supporters. As soon as his work was completed, the prince, accompanied by Qudus, returned to Baharush. They arrived on Friday afternoon, the 18th of Jamadiyuth Thani, the 11th of May, AD 1849. The Sayyidul Ulama, together with the ulamas of the town, came out to welcome the prince and to extend their congratulations on his triumphal return. The whole town was beflagged to celebrate the victory, and the bonfires which blazed at night witnessed to the joy with which a grateful population greeted the return of the prince. 3 days of festivities elapsed, during which he gave no indication as to his intention regarding the fate of Qudus. He vacillated in his policy and was extremely reluctant to ill-treat his captive. He at first refused to allow the people to gratify their feelings of unrelenting hatred, and was able to restrain their fury. He had originally intended to conduct him to Tehran, and by delivering him into the hands of his sovereign, to relieve himself of the responsibility which weighed upon him. The Sayyidul Ulama's unquestionable hostility, however, interfered with the execution of this plan. The hatred with which Qudus and his cause inspired him blazed into furious rage as he witnessed the increasing evidences of the prince's inclination to allow so formidable an opponent to slip from his grasp. Day and night he remonstrated with him, and every cunning that his resourceful brain could devise sought to dissuade him from pursuing a policy which he thought to be at once disastrous and cowardly. In the fury of his despair, he appealed to the mob and sought, by inflaming their passions, to awaken the basest sentiments of revenge in their hearts. The whole of Baharush had been aroused by the persistency of his call. His diabolical skill soon won him the sympathy and support of the masses. "I have vowed," he imperiously protested, "to deny myself both food and sleep until such a time as I am able to end the life of Haji Muhammad Ali with my own hands." The threats of an agitated multitude reinforced his plea and succeeded in arousing the apprehensions of the prince. Fearing that his own life might be endangered, he summoned to his presence the leading ulamas of Baharush for the purpose of consulting as to the measures that should be taken to allay the tumult of popular excitement. All those who had been invited responded, with the exception of Mullah Muhammad-e Hamzi, who pleaded to be excused from attending that meeting. He had previously, on several occasions, endeavored, during the siege of the fort, to persuade the people to refrain from violence. To him, Qudus, a few days before his abandonment of the fort, had committed, through one of his trusted companions of Mazindaran, a locked saddlebag containing the text of his own interpretation of the Sa'd of Samad, as well as all his other writings and papers that he had in his possession, the fate of which remains unknown until the present day.